main focus of the day has been this legal court case. You'll have seen President Cyril Ramphosa's lawyers arguing against former President Jacob Zuma and arguing that Zuma's attempt to privately prosecute him must fail. Ramaphosa claims it's vexatious. He says he'll suffer irreparable harm if he's forced to appear in the dock in a private prosecution next week. You'll know, of course, all of the politics behind this. Well, you've been watching it today. So is the lawyer and legal expert, Mpumelelo Zikalala. Mpumelelo, good afternoon to you. I really do appreciate the time. You've been watching the argument along with us today. Have you been convinced by either side in this?
Well, I could say that each of the parties were managed to convince me to some extent. Let me start with the bad ones. I wasn't really convinced that the matter is urgent. I think the lawyers for President Ramaphosa did not really state what the irreparable harm is going to be. They even conceded that, yes, there are alternative remedies which are there by court. And on that basis, I think the matter is supposed to fail in urgency. And the judges were quite clear in terms of saying, here, we are only dealing with the urgent matter. Part 2 of this application is going to be dealt with at a later stage. Hence, even the parties which are applying to be the friends of the court were told, please come back at a later stage. For now, we're simply dealing with urgency. It has nothing to do with what you are here to advise us on. The legal principles based on that have been clearly stated, and there's no need for any ambiguity or any need for any further clarity. But with regard to the agency, I did not think that the lawyers of the president were able to prove that this matter is indeed urgent and must be heard on an urgent basis.
Okay, so, I mean, I hear you, and you must be right, you know far more about the law than I do. But if the judges decide, look, we've heard the argument, and this case just shouldn't continue, the private prosecution shouldn't continue, does the urgency thing matter? Or do they have to rule on that before they actually make a decision, right? So even if they think that this case shouldn't continue, the whole thing falls apart on urgency.
Yes, definitely, which is why it's important, and which is why it's important that you have to direct your litigation to the important people who need to take the decision at the end of the day. Now, if you do not include or do not have any higher reliance on the NPA in terms of saying you are the issuer of the certificate, you can solve all this matter by withdrawing and reissuing again a certificate which is suspect specific, you can be able to resolve all these particular problems. You are going to have a problem. And as the applicant, you are the dominant litigants, meaning we are here because of you. So we are going to answer based on what you have stated, based on the allegations that you have made. Now, if you are going to make your application and fail to prove a simple fact of saying which is the irreparable harm which you are going to suffer if your judgment is not granted in your favor, and you fail to prove that, in which the lawyers of the president, they really tried, but other than the rights of the president which pertaining to him as an individual, other than the trying to protect, for lack of a better word, the brand of the office of the president, there was nothing else that was there. Now, they did not go to town in terms of proving why the NPA was not really brought to book, in terms of asking them, why don't you fix the problem that you have started, or any other factor that is there. So at the end of the day, if you can't prove that your matter is urgent and you can't suffice the Part A battle, you are going to have a problem with getting an interim relief, which is going to assist you in making sure that the president does not appear on the dock on the 19th of January. So
that would mean then, if you're right, and he loses on urgency, that next week President Ramaphosa will appear in a dock on a private prosecution that I think every single lawyer I've heard from says won't succeed.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those peculiar matters in which, yes, you can see that in the core merits of the matter, the person who's appearing in the dock is quite right in terms of what he needs to prove. It's just that when it comes to the private prosecution that has been issued, you can even make those representations to the private prosecutor, but the chances of them considering and saying, okay, we do conceive our mistake, you can go on, we are going to withdraw these charges against you, they're not non-existent, by the way. So at the end of the day, it's one of those processes in which you are going to get a chance in order to answer and be able to provide or to prove your innocence in the correct forum, in the correct space and time, and in the correct court, when that is a criminal court, and not when you have to deal with this particular process in civil proceedings. If the president really wanted to deal with this matter without setting a foot in court, the other individual that should have been brought to book should have been the NPA, in terms of saying, NPA, I'm in this trouble because of you. Please fix the issues that you may have, or at least provide clarity so that I know whenever I need to sue for damages at a later stage, you are going to be included for your professional negligence.
Okay, I mean, there's so many different things to this, because as someone who watches our politics quite closely, I would suggest that our president appearing in the dock even for a private prosecution, that image, that photograph, probably on the front page of lots of newspapers around the world or news websites around the world, will cause harm to the country, wouldn't it?
Yes, it will. But there are two most important factors that you need to consider then. Is that particular harm going to be irreparable? But most importantly, have you stated that particular irreparable harm in your papers? The papers speak for you at the end of the day. The legal submissions or the verbal submissions that you have done today, or even in the replying affidavit that would have filed at a later stage. So if you don't include those, then you simply assume that the judges are going to think in the manner in which you are thinking when it comes to irreparable harm, you're going to have a problem. Another thing is that you must also go back to the legal precedents of decided cases in which they would be able to define what irreparable harm is. There are some that would simply say it is a matter of life and death. If I don't get this particular reprieve today, I may not be able to be able to be put back in a position in which I've been previously. So if you talk about the brand or the office of the president, there are a number of times in which they've been humiliated and they've been able to survive that. So if the most important question is, what is so special about this particular case that can't be remedied at a later stage? Which is why then when you step back, you then say, if I want to remedy this particular problem that I'm facing, it is not the prosecutor, because the prosecutor is simply saying, I'm acting on the sole basis of the certificate which was issued to me. So make sure that you are able to fix the certificate and make sure the certificate is correctly written so that you are able to remove the type of problem that you are facing. It does not help if you deal with the prosecutor and not with the tools that the prosecutor has, in this case, the tools being the certificate, which have enabled them to put you in the dock in the first place. So if you want to solve all your problems, deal with the certificate first, and then you can be able to deal with the prosecution at a later stage. Which why it was important, at least from my perspective, in terms of saying by the president, deal with the NPA first and make sure that you have all the assurances that you need from the NPA before you move on to the prosecutor, whose defense at the end of the day will say, I was simply acting on what was being provided to me, and that is the basis of my action.
Mpumelelo Zikalala, really appreciate the time, sir. Thank you very much indeed, as always.